Welcome to The Prisoner's Dilemma, show where we watch and talk about the 1960s TV show The Prisoner. I'm Brendan, and with me is a fellow troublemaker who's had his brains zapped out with a laser, Matthew.
Yes, that's me. Everything is so beautifully quiet now.
Hey, are you the Joker now?
No, I'm one of the lucky ones.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. Everything's so peaceful now.
Well, how's that going to affect the rest of your day?
I'm mostly going to sit in the hospital and then wander around and see if I can't find more Lobo men like me.
Oh, I see. You've this is what drifting is.
Yeah. This is what drifting is.
Yeah. Wait, that's not what I meant. What's
cruising?
Cruising. I appreciate you knew exactly what I was talking about.
Of course, I knew what you were talking about.
When you go into the city and you look around for other
guys with weird marks on their foreheads. Yeah, exactly.
Yep, that's what handkerchief culture is like here in the village.
It's really painful.
They have to because everyone else has all the colors claimed with all their umbrellas and stuff like that.
That's so brutal.
Yeah, so they had to find some other way to like
signal things, you know?
Exactly.
Oh. I mean, I guess if I have to dig a weird quartz laser into my forehead, that's what I'll have to do.
This week we watched A Change of Mind.
We sure did. What'd you think of this one, Brennan?
I had a lot of fun watching this episode.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Yeah, a lot of ways, I think I've gestured before that the back half of The Prisoner is perhaps where some of its weakest moments, or its weakest episodes appear.
Sure.
And the way that this is put together, the things that it's interested in doing, the way that it's presented, really make it feel of a piece with the stuff in the first half, so much so that it kind of surprised me to find it back here. I knew that I knew this episode's content was here, but I'd forgotten how good it was. Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting episode because it is sort of in like the allegorical mode again, or like the metaphorical mode, right? Like the free-for-alls and Dance of the Dead to some extent and so on and so forth. But it also is a lot more grounded, those episodes can be.
Right.
Like it still feels... there's some weird magical realism type stuff happening.
There is, but not so much that I can't imagine all of this happening.
Exactly. Right. So it's sort of it fits nicely. And if we're thinking about like the whole space of The Prisoner, it fits nicely between the like heavily allegorical sort of magical realism episodes, surreal episodes, and the episodes that are more like hardcore spycraft stuff.
Totally. Should we talk about who made this episode before we get into the
Yeah, we did that
summary?
last time, and I thought it went pretty well.
Yeah. So this was written by Roger Parks. Roger Parks, who had been a novelist, who was working as a script editor for the BBC, and who had not written... no, that's not true. He had adapted a Anthony Trollope novel for a show that had not gotten made because of budget stuff.
Yep.
But had been wanting to get into episode scripting and got put onto The Prisoner by a fellow writer called Morris Farhi, who was sort of connected to the whole Lou Grade
ITC crew.
Exactly. and wound up putting this script together and getting it approved after much back and forth with George Markstein, David Tomlin, and of course McGoohan himself. I listened to the commentary for this episode, which was from Roger Parks, and it was really, really interesting to listen to him talk about what it was like to get the thing made.
Yeah, cool. I look forward to hearing the insights on that. The primary thing that I'd heard on that was that he called McGoohan an egomaniac. And McGoohan talked about when he got the script, immediately taking all the kissing parts out.
Yeah. So there were two big points of contention, one of which was the kissing, and one of which was the lobotomy, which we'll talk more about, I think, when we actually get to that scene.
Oh, that's really interesting. I hadn't heard about this.
Yeah. But he basically he'd been thinking a lot about, he got brought in and told what the premise was, this whole idea of like individual versus authority, and had a lot of ideas about indoctrination and brainwashing and stuff like that, and wanted to use some of that in the script. And it was pitching George Markstein on it. And George was immediately saying like, yes, that's great. And then we get into a fight scene, immediately figuring out ways to make it into the kind of prisoner show that he wanted to make.
Sure. Yeah. That's funny.
And then, so he and David Tomlin, the producer, did a bunch of revisions on it before it even went to McGoohan. And McGoohan had a bunch of notes of his own, as I gestured at. And Parks had a lot to say about what a pain he felt McGoohan was at the time, but conceded also that he was brand new at the thing. Like he was, he was familiar with how to do plot in novel length stuff and had been doing some script editing, but he had not brought anything to screen just yet. And clearly they wanted to work with the thing. And so eventually sort of acknowledges that like, at the time, I kind of thought it was a pain in the butt, but seeing the finished product now, I feel like they made the right call whenever they wanted to change something.
Interesting.
And most notably, I think he was really, really stuck out at this idea that McGoohan said, well, you know what? The only way I can really make this work is if I sack the director that we'd planned for this episode and I direct it myself. Which is what he winds up doing. McGoohan directs this episode under the pseudonym
Joseph Surf, which he's used before. He used it for Many Happy Returns.
And for what it's worth, I think he does an extraordinary job. I think this is an excellent episode as far as performance and camera and composition goes.
I agree on performance. I think that the camera and the composition is kind of pedestrian versus what we've seen in The Prisoner so far. Like a lot of the scenes, there are some cool bits. There's some cool bits with like lighting and like the way they stage things, and particularly like really close cropped scenes that I quite like. But there's a bunch of scenes that are just shot like almost like with a sitcom cam, and maybe that's intentional.
Maybe.
But if I think about this versus like Dance for the Dead, even though I'm the number one Dance of the Dead defender, but like I think Dance of the Dead is such a beautiful episode to watch visually, and I think this is an interesting episode to watch visually. But like if I think about my favorite McGoohan directing, right? If we think about like that first Columbo episode, right? Identity Crisis, where like Columbo shows up out of the smoke, right? Like that's fantastic. That's incredible visuals being put in front of me on screen. And there's not really anything like that here, unfortunately.
I don't know if I completely agree, but let's wait until we get to each of those scenes before we call them out. What else to say about Parks before we get into it? So
I had a couple notes on him as well. So
yeah, please.
Parks was previously actually a journalist focused on crime reporting. Which is kind of interesting because it does lean a sort of like, some credence around like penal systems, punishment, so on and so forth, right, to this. And the BBC actually had him as a script editor at the time on a soap opera called A Compact.
Right.
And I think that the soap opera bits are perhaps most clear in some of the cut stuff, some of the kissy cut stuff. But a little bit of that still, I think, sneaks its way into the episode.
Shall we just get to it?
Yeah, I can jump in.
Tell us what happens in A Change of Mind.
Working out of his handmade forest gym, Six is accosted by two Waldos, the striped shirt default village grunt. Beaten soundly, the Waldos threaten Six with a heretofore unmentioned village committee in charge of reforming social dissidents. In short order, Six is summoned before said committee, which he openly taunts. Back at his home, Six meets the new number 2, who claims to have no power over the committee. She was also assigned a welfare agent, number 86, who is meant to improve his case. She drags 2 to a social group debate in the woods, which breaks down due to Six's taunts. Dragged to the hospital, Six meets a man who has undergone a sort of lobotomy to permanently cure him of his social dissidence. Seeing he remains unwilling to conform, the committee labels Six unmutual. After a continued period of unrepentance, the villagers beat him with umbrellas and drag him to the hospital for a lobotomy. Waking up after what is supposedly a successful operation, Six is out of it, but clearly suspicious. He's left in the care of 86 once more, and quickly realizes she's drugging him. Six tricks 86 into taking the drugs herself, then hypnotizes her to reveal the truth of his fake surgery, and for some unspecified future action. Six goes to 2, pretending to have bought the fake lobotomy, and claims he wants to confess to the village. But in the middle of his speech to the village, the hypnotized 86 appears and labels 2 unmutual. Then an angry mob chases 2 away. That's the episode.
That's right.
I have to say that at the end of every summary. Otherwise, how do we know? How do we know that's right. The episode?
Let's talk about these boys.
Let's talk about these boys. Some boys in the woods.
We've already talked extensively about the Waldo situation of cronies sort of showing up basically just to get punched or to do some punching. We've called them Waldos, but they also put me in mind of like hooligans in a Popeye strip or something like that. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, they're just also like they're video game grunts, right?
Yes. They're walking on screen from the right.
Yeah.
Into your waiting fists.
They're literally like color palette swaps of each other as well.
Yeah. This is the first time that I really started to wish that we had some persistent grunts.
Sure.
Where we had one big one and one small one who worked for whoever the number 2 was for that particular week, but basically just existed to be punching bags.
Yeah, I could see that. If we had a couple of good minions, love to have a good minion.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, these minions are John Reginald Hamblin, who was affectionately referred to as Funny John or Naughty John, who was an Australian children's television program play school presenter for 29 years, from 1917 to 1999. So basically, directly after filming this, not directly, it's a little bit longer.
He's one of the car.
Got on the ship. He was a 10-pound palm. So after World War II, there was this sort of like scheme, I guess you could say, uncharitably, for the government, the UK government, to send a whole bunch of UK people to Australia and New Zealand. Because they wanted to get more UK people who have a particular skin tone to be in those locations for strategic reasons.
Right.
And so they basically waived the fees. You only had to pay £10 to migrate to Australia or New Zealand. That's why they were called 10-pound palms. So he and
what's POMS?
POM, yeah, POMS. POMS is so 10-pound palm or 10-pound palms. These were the people who migrated to Australia or New Zealand. So he and his wife migrate there, and then he ends up being a children's show presenter for basically 29 years from the majority of the rest of his life, which I just thought is wild. What about history?
Sorry, I had to figure out this term.
Yeah.
The terms. Okay, so I'm reading from an ancient website.
An ancient website.
Yeah.
There's dust on this.
Yeah, that's how you know that it's correct. If it's old. The terms pommy with a Y, pommy with IE, and pom used in Australia, South Africa, and New Zealand usually denote a British person. Newspapers in Australia were using the term by 1912 when it first started appearing in Western Australia, and was said to be short for pomegranate, with the terms Jimmy and Jimmigrant also in use.
Awesome. Jimmigrant.
Skipping down, there are several folk etymologies for pommy and pom. The best documented of these is that pommy originated as a contraction of pomegranate, which was Australian rhyming slang for immigrant.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're all Cockney there in Australia. So that's one. And the other one is Michael Billington.
Good name.
AKA number 46, which is funny because they double up with the Lobo Man from later. That's literally how he's credited, by the way. Lobo Man, as in man who has a lobotomy. Anyway.
A woo.
So he's best known as this Colonel Paul Foster in a 1970 sci-fi fiction TV series called UFO. He had actually been chosen to star in UFO because a lady who was involved in the series, Sylvia Anderson, saw him in this episode and was like, I love the way this guy takes a punch. Let's get him on screen. But what's interesting, he's actually screen tested for James Bond more than any other actor.
What?
Yeah. So Michael Billington, who's the darker hair of our two Waldos here, people saw him. You can Google him. He's got a bunch of shirtless pics that'll pop up. He was screen tested a ton as James Bond in this period. People really thought he might have been the next one at a bunch of different times.
Well.
Yeah. I thought that was fun. These two basically, they're like bullies, I guess. They're like village bullies.
Yeah, basically.
They're like, you're working out in your gym, huh? Too good for our gym, huh? Start throwing his punching bag at him.
I expect him to have like pomodors and leather jackets and stuff like that, you know?
Oh, man, what's it from Fallout 3? The snake... I'm not going to remember.
Tunnel snakes?
The tunnel snakes. Yeah, tunnel snakes rule.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are a couple tunnel snakes for sure.
Yeah, they die like tunnel snakes, too.
They do die like tunnel snakes. Well, they don't die. They come back later. But yeah, they get beaten really badly. Then they die just off screen. They hit a kill plane. Number 6 beats them up. And clearly all of this, as we can tell later, was set up so that they could have some excuse to put number 6 in front of this committee. Right?
Right.
They just sent these two Waldos into the woods to get beat up.
Yeah, this is number 6 is using his homemade gymnasium that we gestured at in the previous episode.
Yep. And that you were like, I think we see him build it. I don't think we see him actually build it, but we do see him use it.
I think I conflated that with the stuff in
Chimes for Big Ben.
Chimes of Big Ben when he starts making his own tools out in the woods.
Yeah, makes sense. So yeah, there's not a lot here. One thing I did want to call out right at the beginning, though, before we got too much further in, we actually skipped it a little bit. But for now, a few times, we've had Robert Rietti, who I mentioned previously for Many Happy Returns, who actually does the number 2 voiceover for the intro credits. So it is not our number 2 of the episode. They do use his footage, but it's not his voice. Instead, it's Robert Rietti's voice.
Yeah, whenever they cut to number 2, it's just them sitting and looking menacing or concerned sometimes in the big round seat, but never actually speaking.
Yeah. Which is interesting because it's like, this is a mysterious voice. And my very first time watching this series back, I don't know, like 20 years ago or something, I thought this was the voice of number 1.
Oh,
I thought they were doing like a stealth reveal of like who number 1 was as I was watching these episodes.
Right.
Who knows if I'm right, though? No spoilies. So
listeners, don't write in to tell Matthew about the prisoner.
I'm watching for the first time. We're going to find out together.
I'm begging you, don't do it.
Don't tell me anything. So from there, we basically immediately get to this committee, right? We basically cut to he's already been called into this committee.
Yes. He's in sort of a waiting room. There's a number of people that are waiting to see the committee, the committee, or have just seen the committee in various states of distress or panic. One lady is crying her eyes out, and we see someone sort of march out and give a frantic confession at the prompting of a speaker.
Yeah,
of like a wireless speaker saying like, repeat after me.
Yep. So the guy doing the confession is Michael Miller. You've actually seen him before on The Prisoner. Do you remember?
I don't, but he looked quite striking. So it's surprising that I didn't recognize him.
So he was in The General. He's the guy who drives up to 6 on the beach and is like, playing hooky. And he said, press 6 says, are you prefects? Right.
Gotcha.
So I do kind of like that we have him back here again. Sure. It's a bit of, you can imagine the continuity of like, this is a guy who they have doing grunt duty during the general, and they've kept him around the village, and now they're having him sort of play act a it's tearful confession.
This is what I'm saying. We need a crew of goons.
We do need a crew of goons.
Yeah.
What's interesting, though, as well, in the script, Miller is not being told to repeat anything. He's just saying these things.
I see.
And that's a pretty big change, right? Because now it starts feeling more like a forced confession, right?
Right.
Which were, if we're thinking about at the time and we're thinking about like all these Soviet era things, and there was a bunch of, putting up members of the prior regimes up for sort of show trials, right? And making them make confessions and things like that, right?
Right.
So clearly these are things that at least McGoohan was thinking about as he was adapting the script.
Yeah, perhaps wanting to have a stronger sense that the committee has their hands on whoever it is that is doing these things.
Yeah. Number 42, who you mentioned, she's the crying lady. She'll show up a bunch in this episode, but this is our first time seeing her. She actually gets kind of like a mini arc, which is kind of interesting.
She does, yeah.
So she had a brief TV and film star sort of run. But then I have a quote here from a Michael Winner that said, she quit acting, found a handsome and rich husband, and settled down to a delightful life with Alan Scott. He's both a scriptwriter and the owner of a Scotch whiskey company. All right, good for her.
So wait, is Alan Scott the handsome man?
Yes.
Okay, because I don't know, that quote.
Yeah, it's ambiguous. Yeah. It's ambiguous. I more like just the idea that like she got in, she did her acting, she found a rich and handsome husband, she got out.
Yeah,
good for her.
Would that we were all so lucky.
Yeah. Pretty soon, then Six is brought in to see the committee. It's very clearly this sort of like the city council set.
Exactly. It's the same round room with stairs descending into it. It has the throne with the big blue light sitting up at the very top.
It does have a throne with a big blue light. Isn't that interesting? It doesn't bring any attention to it, right? It's just sort of there in the background. And there's sort of a bit where we get like a big blue sort of light, but this also isn't brought any attention to, which is really interesting.
Right. Everyone here is in top hats.
Obviously. You have to be in a top hat. Come on.
Otherwise, people won't know you're part of the committee.
Yeah, exactly.
And we get Angelo doing a lot of like stagecraft here. Angelo shows up quite a bit here.
Yeah.
Moving things and setting things up and basically like accommodating whatever process is supposed to be going on.
Yep. So our head chairman of the committee here is Bartlett Mullins, who's just a British actor of stage and TV, who's in Doctor Who, The Saint, etc. Number 18. And what's interesting, because we're basically no longer filming at Port Merion, right? They no longer have as many uncredited extras. So like I have names for all the welfare committee members, even the ones that don't speak, because they're just British actors who were just around and they're like, okay, let's get you on screen. Let's get you a top hat, right? But that doesn't really matter. What does matter is that one of the committee members appears to be a radio or a box or a robot. What'd you take of all that? So directly beneath our number 18, Bartlett Mullins, right?
Yes.
There's a box. And every so often, we're going to hear things not from Bartlett Mullins, but we hear the box instead speaking. You get this sort of tinny affect on it. It's a different voice.
Oh, yes. Look at that.
And the camera like zooms in on this tape recorder, right?
Yeah. This whole setup is one of the spots where I thought the composition was really good. Angelo pulls one of the tables out of the way so that number 6 can basically move into the center of this circle. Yep. Sits down in a seat, and then the seat rises up on sort of a platform in the middle of these people, and then is alternately addressing the head of the committee or spinning in his chair, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, being forced to look in different directions.
Yep. In the script, it's supposed to be that we never actually see anyone speak. We're supposed to just hear a voice and then it turns to someone. By the time we turn to them, they're already done speaking.
Got it.
Which I think would have been a little bit overly sort of confusing. I like the way that they've shot it here. It's still disorienting.
It still has the feeling of like being surrounded, being put upon, being kind of flummoxed by all these questions all at once.
Yep.
What do you make of this? I admit I hadn't realized that so much of the questioning was coming from this computer or device or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting, right? So it looks like a tape recorder if we look at it, which
right.
could suggest that it's just...
I think I assumed it was just recording the session.
It could be, right? But I think the way it's shot at least indicated to me that the tinnier voice was coming from there. And regardless, there's an affect or there's a quality of the tinny voice that makes it sound like it's coming through a speaker, right? It doesn't sound like our chairman number 18's voice. So it could mean that it's pre-recorded questions, which would be kind of fun. There's similar notions from the very last episode, right? Around like prognostication, can't get that. Seeing the future. Yeah, there we go. In terms of like predicting the questions that Six will ask, which would be kind of cool. Mm-hmm. It could be that it's on, some sort of like phone call type things, calling in from a distance, right? Which we've also seen a lot of in this series, right? There's a lot of communication via phone. We just don't usually hear it, right? Yep. And of course, your favorite theory of all, it could be a robot.
It could be a robot.
This could be the robot member of the committee.
Yeah, there could be some sort of computer driving everything. It could be number 2 using a filter or something like that.
Sure.
To, like, direct the committee.
That's interesting.
Without being present himself for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a strong feeling on this, in part just because I think that it's part of the sort of delightful surrealness that's going on in here, right? Of like, there's no reason for this chair to be spinning the way it is. There's no reason for like this scene to be, set up the way it is. It's a terrible way to run a committee, right? There's no reason for any of this.
But it's very effective, right?
Totally.
Like it very, very clearly communicates a sense of what it is that it's like and what they want. Mm-hmm. And likewise, we get a really good sense of how number 6 feels about all this, because he adopts their like clapping as a form of mockery.
Yes, it's really good. They also break like extremely fast. Like they talk to him for a couple minutes and they're like, well, time for tea.
Yeah, this is a very brisk episode in a way that I really like. It's very, very, very snappy, and not in like a unsettling way necessarily. Sure. It's just like, we get in, we understand what it is that they want, we don't belabor the point. And then actually there's an interesting denouement to it where Angelo comes back in silence and moves the table back out of the way. And then number 6 leaves going up the stairs, which is this interesting like ebb and flow of the action, I think.
Yeah. There's even like some weird tension between 6 and Angelo, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Like they lock eyes and they just like hold the shot for a bit. And there's a bit where it looks like 6 is like going to attack him because he's like getting out of the chair very quickly, which is interesting because like to this point, we haven't really seen 6 and Angelo interact.
Right.
Like Angelo is just a background character.
Yeah, I don't think I have a sense of how number 6 feels about Angelo at all.
Yeah. There's not really more to that in this episode, but I do want to like call it out, like signposting this, particularly for people who are watching this for the first time, to like pay attention to what's going on with Angelo and 6 going forward.
Yeah, in the same way that I've gestured at, it would be neat if there were a bunch of goons that are there to provide like some sort of a regular presence within the show. Angelo is a regular presence within the show, and that's worth thinking about as we get into the finale.
Yeah. The thing I wanted to bring up here is that this feels a lot like Kafka's The Trial.
Oh, sure. Say more.
So Kafka's The Trial, if you're not familiar, right? This is like a 1914-15 novel. It was published posthumously back in like 1925 or something. So it had been out for a long time at this point. It managed to make its way into, an English translation. It was fairly well read even at the time, right? And The Trial is basically about this person trapped within bureaucracy. Right. So Joseph K is the main character, and he's trapped in this bureaucracy of being told sort of like, he's been accused of something. He has to appear for court, but he can't like get to the court. Or when he gets to the court, it's sort of bizarre, right? Like it has a very The Prisoner vibe to it in terms of someone sort of fighting against a bureaucracy and like being accused of things they don't quite understand. Anyway, I think it's a clear inspiration for this episode, especially. So
also worth saying, we called out Manchurian Candidate as part of the stuff that was clearly in the air as part of It's Your Funeral.
Yep.
Roger Parks straight up says, I just read the Manchurian Candidate. I thought I could do something with that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so good. So Six leaves and he sort of goes up to this little stand that we saw 93 at. And he sort of repeats again tauntingly, quite right, at the sort of like speaker is saying. And the script, this is very different. In the script, everybody in the room just like immediately like turns away from him because we're sort of like immediately are supposed to be communicating something about him becoming a social outcast, right? Instantly.
Yeah, we started getting that instead in the very next scene.
Yeah, as you're sort of walking along. I do like this shot. We get this like long distance shot. Now, I think it's pretty sure it's because they just couldn't actually have them at Portmeirion. And so it's other actors framed at a distance. But it's a pretty cool shot of at Portmeirion sort of walking up this way. We get Six sort of saying, good day, number 61, which is wild as well because this is a Six who greets members of the village and like does the salute unironically to them.
He loves old ladies.
He does love old ladies. He has got a soft spot.
That's right. One thing from the script, Roger Parks wrote this scene taking place on Man-Holding Ball Street. Which is, of course, Hercules holding the globe.
Man-Holding Ball is really good. Number 61 wasn't credited, but she's Mabel Etherington, so I'm going to credit her. Again, I have the credits for basically everybody because we're not in Portmeirion anymore. So everybody was an actor or actress. Mm-hmm. So from here, Six gets back to his house. And for the very first time, we meet our number 2 in the episode.
Yeah. What do you think of this number 2?
I really like this number 2.
It's very good. He's played by John Sharp.
Yeah, so John Sharp, who was in The Avengers, 1973's The Wicker Man as Dr. Ewan, Kubrick's 1975 Barry Lyndon as Doolin, who's Bishop Guido in Brother, Sun, and Sister Moon, which was a Francis of Assisi biopic. He's in a bunch of stuff. He's, a well-regarded film and TV actor, and I think it really shows in this episode. I think he does a great job. Yeah,
he's a very, generally a very soft-spoken sort of person who can really turn it up when he needs to, really land some explosive scenes later on.
Yeah, I think his most impressive thing is his range, right?
Yes.
He kind of performs the role almost as if he's doing like a children's show, right? He kind of sounds like Winnie the Pooh for much of this.
Yeah. Park said that he wrote number 2 as sort of a misogynistic horse dealer.
He's so misogynistic. It's crazy. Anyway, but I think that like he gets, I think he's the only 2 that I find genuinely unsettling because of the way that he can get like actually quite threatening later on. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I think he does great.
Yeah, me too.
So there's this a classic 2 and 6 sort of back and forth here. What I thought was most interesting, just to like continue on the thing that you called out back in Hammer into Anvil, Six refers to himself as Six. He says, "I'm public enemy number 6."
Yes, indeed.
Which is wild that we got here, right? Like, timeline shenanigans, who knows where we're at? But like the fact that we've had such a change in Six.
I do think in this particular instance, he's doing it sort of out the side of his mouth.
Sure.
So, he's not really committing to it in a big way, but he is making a joke that he probably wouldn't want anyone else to make about him. In fact, explicitly chides someone for making in Many Happy Returns.
Yep. And the same thing could be said in Hammer into Anvil, right? In terms of like, well, he's just, he's playing up that he's number 6. As like a means of manipulating this guy into where he wanted. But even the fact that he's willing to do that when before even writing it down, he had to write a question mark after it. It's crazy. They've really got him.
I love it when I get him.
Number 2, big mug that says, I love it when I get him.
Don't talk to me until I've gotten my number 6.
Exactly. This is also where we get introduced to our 86, right?
Oh, my goodness.
Oh?
Matthew.
Yeah?
We've had a lot of great performers.
Uh-huh.
We've had some pretty ladies.
Yes.
This, I think, is The Prisoner's first bona fide bombshell.
All right. Tell me more. What's so good about Angela Brown?
Angela Brown is, to use a technical term, hot.
I'm glad.
She is just she's
a classic blonde, right? She's like a starlet.
Exactly. She is the archetypical femme fatale.
Totally.
She looks the part of the dame that walks into your office with a case that you really don't want, but you're forced to accept. Mm-hmm. She's blonde. She has these dark eyebrows. She's got these bright red lips. Mm-hmm. She has these fine cheekbones. And she comports herself with this mixture of flirtatiousness and confidence. She's just like, I really cannot stress enough, like, we've had so many wilting lilies.
Sure, yeah, totally.
And she is both like conventionally attractive and a talented actress.
Totally.
And given things to do by the script. It is remarkable.
So I think it's definitely partly that. I think it's also partly that Angela Brown actually liked McGowan.
What?
Which is like a bit of a rarity when it comes to like his fellow actresses or his actresses working with him. So she had been in Avengers Danger Man the Saint. She met him for Danger Man. They were doing an episode called The Girl in the Pink Pajamas, and she was going to be the girl in the pink pajamas. And she was it was one of her first acting roles. And she tells this story of, meeting him there, that she wasn't a fan at all of his, she hadn't watched the show before.
All right.
But when she met him, she basically just like instantly fell in love with him. She says, quote, "I just adored him and he was so kind to me. I was a kid. I was 21 and he took over the lighting, I remember. There was a scene where I had to be lying there rescued from some terrible situation. I was lying there thinking, what a lovely man." And between takes, he was saying, "Get more light in there. Get more shadow there." He was actually lighting it at a time when he wasn't actually in charge of anything. He was just the actor. And I loved him from that moment on. So when I was asked to do The Prisoner, I said, "Oh, yes, please." So she actually wants to be there, which I think goes a long way, right? Into making her a joy to watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, so, I think she probably would have liked if they kept the kissing scenes in from the sound of things.
Well, if only all of the other women had just liked McGowan.
Yeah, clearly it was their fault.
Yeah.
So there's a great little intro to her here. You're right. She comes off as like secure and confident and intelligent, right? She's very brusque, no nonsense. Mm-hmm. She's sort of being introduced as being assigned to number 6 to try and like
help him return back to society before he goes too far over the edge and is declared unmutual.
Mm-hmm. Though that word hasn't been spoken yet, right?
No,
so it's a word
yet.
We'll learn later. I think there's a couple fun little bits in this. So on his way out, 6 has been making tea the whole time, and 6 turns to 2 and says, "No time for tea." And 2 says, "No, only your future," which is quite good, right? Tea leads to see the future.
Yes. Tea features prominently in this episode.
It was going to feature even more prominently.
Oh, really?
So in the script, originally what was supposed to happen is that 86 was supposed to take over making the tea. And this would have been the first time of us seeing that 6 doesn't like the way she makes the tea. That it's not just an excuse later on for him to like take over making the tea. The script specifically says that she makes it in a continental style, meaning American style, European style, right? Because that's the continent from UK, as opposed to in the sort of British style that he likes.
What do you think that means?
What do I think her making this tea differently means?
No. I mean, wait, how would you prepare it differently?
Oh, so I think it's just the way that we see him preparing it, right, versus how she was preparing it, right?
No, that's what I mean. Like, what do you think what is the difference? I don't know enough. Like, you put the water and you put the tea together.
So in the sort of the British version of it, particularly the very like heightened ritualistic way, right? It's a bit more like a tea ceremony almost, right? Where there's specific orderings to specific things, right? And little like rhymes almost to tell you what to do. The continental style is instead very utilitarian, right?
Oh, I see.
So if it had been here, it would be sort of signaling to the audience, in terms of my understanding at least, right, that like this is a very no nonsense, very utilitarian character, whereas Six at least is someone who, you know, can be very logical, but has very specific proclivities, right, and is very, you know, set in his ways on those things.
A very defensive about his territory.
Exactly, and in his space as well, right? To come in his space and make tea, no, thank you.
Yeah. Continuity error.
Is it?
Number 2 leaves.
Yep.
Number 6 and number 86 start talking in his kitchen.
Yep.
And then we immediately see number 2 watching them
from his office.
Talking from his office.
Is it a
How
continuity
do you get there so
error?
fast?
I think it's pretty clear, Brendan. This number 2 can teleport.
No, he can't teleport.
Are you sure?
I'm positive.
The rest of the episode, he's going to teleport a lot.
That's absolutely not the case.
Oh, yeah? Okay, yeah. What is it then? What's happened here?
What I think is happening here is clearly he has a twin brother.
Oh.
Yeah. Or like a precise duplicate of himself.
Life model decoy.
Life model decoy, like in The Prestige.
Exactly.
Yeah. Spoilers for The Prestige.
Okay. Yeah, it's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of like it, right? You're right. It is a continuity error, but I think it adds to the sort of magical realism of this, right? The sort of storybook nature of this, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Like it is, everything flows together so well that it's more just amusing rather than like,
yeah.
Oh, this is a problem and it screws up the whole episode. You know, it's like when you're watching The Prisoner, there are certain allowances that you need to make. And it is entirely subjective about what works for you and what doesn't. This works for me.
Yeah, there's a bunch of folks who watch this episode and actually are really against it. So I would say maybe I should have said it was a fan favorite. Maybe I'd say it's a divisive episode, right? And I think you're completely right. I think it depends a lot in terms of like how bought in are you? If you're sufficiently bought in and you're just like having a good time with it, you don't really mind when there's all these sort of like weird moments like this.
Totally.
So we first get our example of the number 2's patented misogyny.
Men's rights have come to the village.
Where he yells, females, like a Ferengi.
Yeah.
So what's actually happened here, though, is kind of fun because this is a consequence of cutting the kissy bits. Because in the script, 86 was supposed to make a pass at 6. 86 was supposed to say, won't you look at me, you know, like a man looks at a woman.
I see.
And there, too, is supposed to go females because he's mad that she would, like, be attracted to 6. Yeah, exactly.
I can't believe she likes Patrick McGowan. I'm so mad.
No woman has ever liked him before. This goes against all my plans. She'll ruin everything. I just thought that was a funny bit there. And so,
it's so like this is The Prisoner's Dilemma, right? Is that like there's so much about this show that is so specific and so strange and so peculiar because it is Patrick McGowan that is in here. Any other man in the world on television would have been like, yeah, I'll flirt with this lady. Yeah, that sounds great. Totally. And yet we get the most self-righteous Catholic boy in the world.
We haven't talked about the religious readings for a bit, but you could get a Mary Magdalene in here and yet Jesus would still do the Jesus stuff.
What if the village is, what if number 2 is Satan, the great adversary, putting on different disguises over and over and over again to try and lead Patrick McGowan into temptation? I
like it. I like it.
Throw yourself in front of this great big ball if you're so great. Won't the angels protect you?
Won't your father, the ITC producer, won't he protect you? Anyway.
Wait, how does Angelo feature in this schema?
Peter. He's not Judas.
No, he's kind of like an opposite Judas.
Yeah,
for reasons that we can't talk about. You think Peter's an opposite Judas?
You know, 3 times he denies him before the cock crows, and he still goes on and he makes the church.
Well, I mean, if the achievement stone did have
if he did have Angelo's face,
then we could say this is the rock upon which I will build my church.
They do crucify him upside down at the end of the series.
That's weird. It's weird that people don't bring that up.
It's so weird. This last like 5 minutes have been intensely. These two guys are raised Catholic.
Yeah, it's true.
Anyway,
which makes us the perfect people to watch The Prisoner.
It does actually. It's good insights.
Social group.
So it's been mentioned a couple times. The committee just called it the group. 86 first introduces it as the social group. What it appears to mostly be, it's like a debate club in the woods.
It has the feeling of a debate club that is also like Alcoholics Anonymous or something like that.
Totally. In the script, Parks refers to them as all the remarks are made with the restrained earnestness of undergrads.
That's so good.
It's good. It's a good line. It's true.
It's really accurate, too. Like, these people think they are the most important person to be speaking right now.
The only intelligent person who's ever existed. No one ever has had a thought before them. It's really good. Thank
goodness I'm here to set everyone straight.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really silly, right? The 42, we meet her again. She's back again. Again, she has a mini arc, which is kind of cool. Yep. We learn that the reason why she's in trouble is because she's a poet and she was busy composing a poem and so didn't respond to a greeting.
Wow.
Yeah, how could she?
I mean, that's some very good like police state, like
it is
1984 style, like we're gonna get you.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like social control is kind of go crazy. But it is interesting, right? Like the distinctions here, because like 42 is in trouble for ignoring a greeting. We just saw 61 ignore 6's greeting and like doesn't matter, right? Like you're a social outcast. You don't have to pay attention now.
Yeah, I mean, he's made it clear he doesn't want to be part of the community. So people aren't going to treat him as part of the community.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Though that's been true for a while and there's been no problems with it up until now. But more on that later, I guess. We've got a couple of social group members here that I just wanted to call out. So we have Michael Chow, who is our only well, maybe that's not fair. Our only Asian character that we're going to see in screen on this episode, right? It's again, the vague gesturing that this is supposed to be like an international group. So he was a TV and film actor. He was in The Saint for a few appearances. He actually made a few appearances in Rush Hour, the Rush Hour series as well. Okay. He might have been number 282 or 262. I couldn't quite read. He's got one of those badges that's hard to read. And then we have Joseph Cubey, who's another social group member. He's the one who's in the red and white, who's like stands up, saying that doesn't matter. He was a TV and film actor who often played vaguely Middle Eastern characters. He's born on Gibraltar. I was
going to say, yeah. He was clearly not from these parts, but I couldn't quite identify where.
He was twice in Danger Man, so he's just like an old hand at the ITC sort of production stuff. I think they do a perfectly good job of sort of a surreal little debate in the woods. 6 is, as you called out, still doing the committee clap that he learned. The script does not call for that, so this is an invention of McGowan's to have him just keep on clapping.
It's good.
It is good.
He's being forced to go places that he would rather not go, but he's not going to demonstrate any subservience or tolerance for any of this.
Right. But notably, like he's not like fighting his way away, right? Like
he's not. No.
That like nobody is physically forcing him to go to this thing. At least he is sort of physically forced to go to the next one, right?
Right. Yeah. Like there was no like he beat up those guys in the woods and then was summoned to the committee and then went to the committee. Like Like he seems to come when people call.
Yeah, which is interesting, right?
Right.
This is a big difference even from like if we think back to Hammer into Anvil, right? Where 2 like summons him to his house and 6 goes, nah, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Go send your Waldos.
Yeah, early episodes, number 6 would absolutely not be coming and going at the insistence of some new institution of the village that didn't exist yesterday.
Yep. And everybody's acting as if it has always existed.
Of course.
I do wonder to what extent this is just Six's bored.
I think that's got to be a consideration. There is nothing else to do other than what's going on in the village on any particular day.
And he already works out for half the day.
That's right. Yeah. Maybe he's too tired to go do anything else.
Well, we've seen he basically works out for half the day, plays some chess, and then like drinks coffee all afternoon. And then somehow still sleeps at night. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, presumably he has a bunch of espresso.
Yep.
Over and over and over again. And then he has tea.
Yes. That calms him down.
And then it's time to listen to some music in the park.
Yeah. And then the lamp puts him to sleep every night.
That's right.
Go and sleep.
Sleep.
The script also calls for when the social group, aka the undergrad debate club, when they chase him off or they run away, they're supposed to be yelling unmutual at him. But instead they hold off on that word reveal, right, until a little bit later.
That's good. I think deploying it later is wise. He basically gets up to leave, goes past a bush, and runs into a doctor or an orderly of some kind who says, "Oh, good, it's time to go to the hospital."
It's so convenient.
So he gets that I have
to find you here in the woods.
Oh, thank goodness I found you here on the set where we're recording this.
Yeah.
And Six is like, you know what? Fine, let's go to the hospital. And he gets into the golf cart.
He's menaced a little bit. There's like 4 guys.
That's true.
Not that he hasn't fought off 4 guys before.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't have the advantage of his gym set around. He needs
true.
Home
field advantage.
Exactly. He's this is a random encounter.
Yeah. Diddly 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 diddly. 4 doctors are here. They're all like bouncing.
Pitcher attack.
He goes to the hospital. He gets
his knees hit.
He gets a physical, is what I was going to say. This is George Pravda is the doctor here, number 54. He's a Czechoslovakian turned British TV actor who's in Doctor Who, Avengers, The Saint. He also had some bit parts in like Thunderball and the third Pink Panther film. And he says a couple interesting things. The one thing that I wrote down here was that he says that life here suits you to Six. And Six doesn't say anything to that. He just lets that slide. Sure. Which is not to say that he agrees, but...
No. But he isn't very good. He does basically get to go exercise all morning and then luxuriate for the rest of the day. It seems like a nice place to get kidnapped.
Yep. I mean, this is what M said right on their episode.
Yeah.
Seems like a good place to be kidnapped.
Yeah.
So he leaves the doctor.
Have you ever had your patellas hit with a hammer?
Yeah, of course.
Of course. I've never had my patellas hit with a hammer. Yeah.
Have you never had to do like a full physical?
Have I ever had to do a full physical? Haven't seen a doctor.
Ever?
30 years. In 30 years.
30 years, okay. That can't be true.
I don't think anyone's ever hit my knees with a hammer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I had to...
Am I going to die?
Yeah, you specifically need to have your knees hit with a hammer every 30 years or you will die.
Anyone born... Anyone born...
Yes? Anyone born? Just anyone.
By the time you're 40... By the time you're 40, you should have your knees hit with hammers.
I'm hitting you, says the doctor as he hits your knees with hammers. So I've had to have a number of physicals as a kid, right? I did a fair amount of international travel, and for certain ones of those, they would like make you do physicals, right?
Sure.
Just to see like everything was on the up and up. And then, I'm trying to immigrate to Canada. Shout outs to Canada. And so I had to do like physicals for that too.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in a small coastal village where everyone dressed colorfully and didn't let us leave. So it's kind of peculiar. You would think that'd be ground zero for getting your knees hit with hammers.
Brennan was saying that we don't see any children in the village in an earlier episode. Well,
because they were all crushed with hammers.
They were all crushed. But wait, don't worry, folks. Don't worry, folks. As I alluded to then, we will see a couple children in the village later on. And one of those just might be Brendan. Anyway.
The idea that I've been secretly in the prisoner the entire time.
What a good reveal that would be.
Like, this is stealth, a version of like, oh, I was the kid in The Sopranos, so I'm doing a Sopranos watch along thing.
That'd be really funny. We could still claim it was. Anyway.
Yeah, that was me. It was 1967.
Yeah. Yep.
I was 13 years old.
So he leaves the hammer room finally after all this time. And he runs into a couple of what the script calls lobo men, right? So lobotomized men. One of them just sort of smiles at him plainly, and he has a little bit of a conversation with another one, right? Mm-hmm. So this guy is, I put him in the wrong section. There are so many villagers this time. It took a lot. Anyway, this is Thomas Heathcote, number 46. He was a British character actor for film, radio, and TV, though nothing we'd really recognize. He spent many years appearing as a farmer Ed Lanton in a soap opera, Crossroads. We also see here in just a second Hugh Elton, who's the patient who's like first like screaming. Or sorry, no, John Bailey's the first patient screaming in the chair, number 62. He was uncredited here in a bunch of other cases. Sorry?
In the aversion therapy room.
Yes. What I thought was most interesting in this scene is when Six peeks in and sees John Bailey, number 62, being tortured by seeing images of Rover slowly moving towards the camera, as if he's like those people in the like fictionalized telling of the first people to see a film of a train coming into a station. Six responds as if he's going to go get in there and save the guy.
Yeah, he seems very disturbed by this.
Yeah, which is weird because like, he's been in this hospital before, and he's seen similar things happening.
Yeah, he's seen all kinds of stuff going on here.
Yeah. It's weird why he would specifically react to this guy, or why now, after this time has passed, he now reacts this way to this guy.
Maybe he's concerned that this is going to happen to him.
Yeah. He's going to get in there. He's going to leave the guy in there, but he's going to bust up all the machinery. Number 6 versus another computer.
That's right. Then we go to the committee.
Yes.
The committee has the report from the poetry reading debate club that said, number 6 was here and he was mean and then he ran away.
And so because of that, they all teleport in disgust.
I hate you.
Yeah, exactly. It's the opposite of nothing personnel kid. It's extremely personnel kid, and then they teleport away. Yeah,
they say the room goes dark, and they say, we're declaring you unmutual.
Yep. Well, not quite. Is he unmutual already?
He is.
I thought that he had one more step before he's unmutual.
We are bound to classify you as unmutual. We must warn you if any further complaint is lodged against you, it will be necessary to give you the treatment, instant social conversion. Right. And then the lights come up and everyone is gone.
Yes. Because of the big teleportation machine.
Right.
Except for
Angelo, who's just there looking on placidly as he always is. Mm-hmm. Once again, he and number 6 lock eyes. And then after a beat, Angelo pulls away the table and number 6 marches out.
It is interesting. This is the scene I was referring to earlier, where like as soon as the lights go off, right, a blue light comes back on.
Yes.
which previously we've seen as being projected from this weird blue eye throne thing, which like stays on for the remainder of this scene, right? Until he like leaves number 2's office, or I guess this is supposed to be the council chambers, but it's the same set.
Yeah, it seems to represent like passing judgment or something.
Yeah.
Some sort of change in circumstances.
There's a cool bit here. We didn't call it out, but like earlier number 6 had gone to like go get one of these like broadsheets, like the newsletters or whatever. And even if other people were avoiding him, the guy still like handed him the sheet. Right. But this time we get the like play off that of the guy running away when he sees 6.
Yeah. So number 6 leaves the office and the streets are empty. And when people see him, they turn and head the other direction. People are not willing to have anything to do with him. To the point of when he picks up the phone, which is always responded to him, no one responds.
Yeah. In the script, he specifically calls saying he wants to speak to number 2. But here he's just saying hello a bunch of times.
Right.
And it's here that we meet my favorite element of the episode, which is these lovely people who, out of the kindness of their hearts, are going to help this poor wayward soul. It's the appeals committee.
It is the
subcommittee. Sorry.
The appeals subcommittee is perhaps one of the most menacing things in the episode.
They rule. They're so good. They're like a Dark Souls Soulsian style boss that's like several different people.
Yeah, they all share the same health bar.
Exactly. The door opens. You see on the bottom of the screen it says appeals subcommittee.
And they all open their mouth and go,
the main lady, the head of the committee here is number 48. That's how she's credited, but she is very clearly wearing number 56, the pin. So I don't know why they did that.
She's the boss. She can do whatever she wants.
She can. She's June Ellis. She did a bunch of film and TV actors. She had multiple appearances in BBC's Sunday Night Theater. And in the boss battle version of this, she wields a giant claymore. So watch out for that.
She was evidently married to one of the producers.
There you go. Yeah. I think she does great.
Yeah. Excuse me. She was married to Alan Bromley, a British television director, producer, and sometime actor who had worked on a bunch of Doctor Who, Swiss Family Robinson, a bunch of stuff like that.
Cool. There's a fun bit here as well, right? We see 42 again. So there is this like consistent through line of 42 is like almost like a second perspective character, right? If we're seeing,
yeah. So she went to the social group and apparently benefited from it enough that she is now part of the institution of the committee and its subcommittee. Yeah,
which is kind of cool because it sort of shows us, or shows 6 maybe, like this is a pathway that you could be on if you were to like be accepting, right, of the situation.
Yes, he explicitly says, quick off the mark, appeal subcommittee already, you get around.
Yep. Which, we know where this is all headed, and we know this was all intended from the beginning, right? That it was going to lead there, right? But like, so you could imagine that you could take this at face value of like, well, this is what you should be doing, number 6. But I think what it clearly is supposed to be doing is it's actually acting as a deterrent for number 6.
Oh, sure. I think it's just making him angrier.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a weird bit here. This happened a couple times now of us jumping back to 2 and our very own supervisor, Peter Swanwick, right? Number 48, classic, 28, sorry. Great to see him here, even though he doesn't have a lot to do. And 2 keeps on making vague, threatening allusions. I guess this is for the audience.
I think so, yeah.
So like he like taps his forehead to clearly indicate I'm going to lobotomize number 6.
I'm going to get his brain.
Yeah, I'm going to get his brain. But like, given what we know, and given that we know that number 2 just planned us to get there the whole time, right? Mm-hmm. I can only read this in retrospect as 2 is just like having some fun. He's just like,
I think so, yeah.
This is funny to me. Anyway.
He says, now let's see how our loner withstands real loneliness. And for his sake, I hope it will not be for long. Mm-hmm. Did you hear that? For his own sake.
tapping his temple.
And then we get what I think is one of the most interesting parts of the episode.
Yeah.
Which is that number 6 got what he wanted. Everyone leaves him alone. No one wants anything to do with him. And so he can do whatever he wants and no one's going to bug him.
Yep.
And he hates it. He is completely and utterly isolated. We see him wandering in the woods, sort of looking forlornly at the distance. But then we see him in the village, like trying to just like get coffee or go about his routine. Like, as we gestured at before, he has sort of a luxurious sort of life here.
Yeah.
And that is dependent on other people in a way that I don't think he appreciated before this.
Yeah.
Where if you want to sit by yourself at a coffee shop and drink your coffee, you still need someone to make the coffee and bring you the coffee.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really fascinating to see him like bowing to social pressure in this way, right? Mm-hmm. When he so clearly explicitly prides himself on being like somebody who does not bow to social pressure.
Right. And I think it's especially interesting when we consider that more than other episodes, this is a scene of McGowan's creation because he is the guy behind the camera as well. Like, he is specifically saying like, yeah, let's put number 6 in this position and let's have me act in that way because this is what would happen.
Yeah, I was going to maybe bring this up a little later, but I'll do it now. I think it's interesting, right? We can draw a pretty clear illusion between this episode and Free For All.
Yes,
right?
Totally.
Where in Free For All, 2 comes to 6 and he says, here's a game we're going to play. It's called an election. We're going to play with the notion of an election. And here we have 2, not even directly 2 at first, but later 2 coming to 6 and saying, this is a game we're playing. It's called being part of the social contract. And in Free For All, 2 has to go to 6 and say, here's a game. Here's a prize at the end of the game to incentivize 6 to play the game.
The carrot.
Yeah, exactly. Here's a carrot. But in this case, there's no prize. Well, or said another way, the prize is he gets to retain his current situation. And that's not enough for him to play the game. Right. But then he loses it.
Yeah, it's more about, hey, here's a game to play, and if you lose, it's going to be bad for you.
Yeah. But this is, 6 at the beginning of the episode, taunting, laughing, saying,
of course,
I don't care about that.
Yeah, you can't do anything to hurt me. Oh, you took my coffee away.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Life's simple pleasures.
Yeah.
No Waldos are coming out to fight me in the woods anymore.
That's right.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? To like think about how far we've come with 6 as a character to get us from Free For All to here. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so there's a fun cut bit of the script here as well. And in the script, the way that McGowan shoots it, it's just that like all the customers and the waiters like just refuse to engage with him.
Ah, sure.
In the script, they actually chase him off yelling Unmutual again, which is why they cut in the episode to him like jumping into his house and looking disheveled.
Oh, I was wondering about that. Yeah.
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 As it is, he just ends up looking like he just ran home. Like nobody wants to talk to me. I'm going home. I actually really like the way that this scene in 6's house is shot.
For sure.
The appeals subcommittee is shot as if they are like a Greek chorus. Right?
Yeah, they're already in his house when he gets there.
Yes. And they're sort of staged, right? So you can see like all of them in this really tight shot, right? It's sort of like a rectangular framing on this. And like they speak as if they're speaking in one voice because, again, they're a Dark Souls boss, right? They're one entity. They have one HP bar. But they're like trading off sentences and barbs against 6. And they notably say, right, 42 in fact says, at this point, you must be able to recognize this is not a game.
Right. Yes.
So it's 48 who does that. But regardless, right, like...
Or excuse me. I took a correction simply because I think the difference is interesting.
Yeah.
Unmutualism, number 6, more than a game.
Right. Not
a game, but a game plus.
Yes. A game that has real stakes.
Right.
Right. We're back to games. It's been a bit, right? Since we've explicitly been talking about games again, but we are back to explicit games. Yeah. I just think that's really interesting. As I, called out in an earlier episode, the village sets up games for 6 to play, right? And he only starts quote unquote winning when he can trick the village into playing the games with him. And maybe at some point he'll stop playing their games. We'll see.
Maybe.
But he still is unrepentant.
Yeah, he has nothing good to say about the people that are behaving this way. He calls them sheep.
Yep.
The subcommittee marches out of his house. He has a menacing phone call with number 2 talking about social conversion.
Yep.
Gestured at as a more permanent solution than simply being hypnotized or drugged.
Yes.
And then we get an even more menacing thing than the subcommittee. We get evil Fenella Fielding.
We do get our Dark Isabel.
Yeah.
There is one more cut scene in this whole sequence, which is 6 running into 86, like hiding herself in an alleyway. Right?
Oh.
Because they were trying to do like a Romeo and Juliet thing. 86 is saying, it's not allowed for someone to be seen with an unmutual, but I just couldn't wait. And this is also a bit where they have a cut line for 6's, which then explains a later line. He says, I can't stand deceit, least of all from girls in trousers. Which is why he later comments on when she's wearing a dress, him going more feminine than trousers.
Oh, yes. Okay, good. Well,
anyway, could have cut maybe a bit better.
Sure. But yes, we get evil Fenella Fielding getting on the radio and basically assembling people for the imminent social conversion as it's about to take place. Number 6 goes outside and is once again confronted by the appeals subcommittee, who marches up and starts beating him to death with umbrellas.
Yeah, they're a boss. He's powerless against them. He's underleveled.
Yeah.
He's gonna go back in the woods and fight some Waldos.
I want to be super abundantly clear. If you're not watching along, I get it. And sometimes Matthew and I will like gesture at something that takes place in the episode as like a joke when it didn't actually happen that way. But what happens in this episode is a bunch of ladies walk up to number 6 and start beating him to death with umbrellas. It's so good.
It's so good.
He can see it coming and he is powerless. He can't get away. He can't fight back. He's taken so much poise damage.
Ow, ow, ow.
Ooh. They drag him to the hospital.
Yeah.
There's a huge gaggle of people coming along. I think there's a marching band.
There is. Yeah. We've got a drum for sure. It's going to be called back at the end of the episode.
Great.
In the script, notably, it's not the appeals subcommittee that attacks him with hammers. It's just some Waldos, which is worse. It's way better that's the appeals subcommittee attacking him.
It's so much better. Yes. And we bring him into the hospital for social conversion, which we discover is a lobotomy.
Yes. It's kind of wild. Like the episode just kind of turns into like a medical documentary for 5 minutes.
It does. Yes, it does.
Including with an audience.
Yes, right? There is a broadcast of this, and the committee assembles to watch it as if it was like happening in an operating theater. Yeah. Number 86 is like hosting it and explaining the procedure to everyone.
Yeah.
And part of that is that she's doing it for the audience's benefit, because this is not what you might expect a lobotomy to look like for a couple of reasons. One of those reasons is because it's not really going to happen. We're going to fake it in order to trick number 6, because we want number 6 to be compliant, but he's too valuable. We mustn't damage the tissue.
Exactly.
But also because it was originally supposed to be a pre-recorded lobotomy that was broadcast and shown to number 6 as it was happening to trick him into thinking it was happening.
Whoa. Wild.
McGowan had a couple of complaints about this.
Okay.
One is that this would be incredibly gruesome to put on television.
Yeah.
To do like surgery on a man's brain.
Jeez.
Number 2 was that he found it unbelievable that his captors would have found a number 6 duplicate to operate on.
Sure.
Sorry, to clarify, what would be happening there is that he obviously wouldn't be able to see what's going on at the top of his head, but he would be shown a video of it happening. And so he would think, oh, I'm being lobotomized. Right. When actually he's seeing a pre-recorded thing that makes him think, oh, I've been lobotomized. I guess I'm lobotomized now, which is bad.
Guess I better act lobotomized.
Right. Number 3 is that the audience is liable to be even more confused than number 6 based on based on the composition of the thing. And so he went back to Richard Parks and said, we've got to do something different with this if we're going to do any of this. And Richard Parks said, all right, well, let me figure something out. And he talked to his brother. And his brother was a psychiatrist at a hospital. And he said, listen, I've got a script that calls for a lobotomy. And I can't have an actual lobotomy in there. And his brother, who's a psychiatrist, not a neurosurgeon, said, oh, well, one of the things that people do is that they sever the lobe using sound waves.
Okay.
And so you'd have something that looks a little bit more like a radar dish or something like that than like surgical instruments. Maybe you could use something like that. Now, again, he's a psychiatrist, not a neurosurgeon or something like that. And so as the scene unfolds, this is exactly what happens. They basically aim a high-powered radar dish and blast his brain with sound as if they're using that to cut his brain off.
Yeah.
A couple of neurosurgeons wrote into the ITC to complain about their misrepresentation of their craft.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, so lobotomies, right?
Yes.
Let's talk about lobotomies for a hot second.
Let's do it.
So this guy named Antonio Egas Moniz was the guy who sort of made them famous to the point where he shared a Nobel Prize in 1949 for his contributions to lobotomies.
Boy.
Yeah. From the very beginning, though, people were against it. Like in the actual field, right? Actual experts were against this idea. He did a bunch of like rushing to publication with these things. He did a bunch of like just lying or not reporting the negative symptoms that he got from it. A bunch of
and to be clear, like he was being positioned as something that could be used to treat people that have anxiety or depression or other mental disorders and stuff like that. That would basically like sever their personhood from them.
Yes. The big reason why it actually became more popular was actually this guy named Walter Jackson Freeman II, who was in America and got access to one of this guy Moniz's manuscripts and basically became convinced like this is the future. Right. So he does a bunch of lobotomies. And neuroscientists, even at the time, were like, nah, this isn't it. But what he did was he went to the public press. So he went to the press and he goes to the press, this is a miracle cure. So the press starts spreading this around, right, as like reporting on this. And it gets picked up as like, oh, this is an easy fix to, oh, you have a troublesome child? Or you have, a family member who's difficult to take care of. Consider a lobotomy.
Yeah. One size fits all.
Exactly. They basically do the advertisement for him, right? Against, the sort of yells of neurologists going, this isn't how this works, right? But because of this mass of people basically demanding lobotomies for people, it became extremely popular sort of in the early 1950s. But by the end of the 1950s, it was already dying down because people hadn't had to live with the people they'd lobotomized, right?
Yeah.
And there's all these horrific side effects. The only sort of like blunting of affect side effect that was being reported was because they would only check back in on people like 2 weeks after surgery when people were still recovering from surgery, if they hadn't died already. Long term, a bunch of people just became like, catatonic from this. So by the time this episode was coming out, lobotomies were already way, way down in terms of like how many people were actually getting them, to the point where, even if the public would still buy this is a thing that might happen, there's reasons to view this whole thing as sort of critical or with a suspicious eye.
Yeah, certainly growing up, I heard about lobotomies more as a plot device for sci-fi thrillers and stuff like that.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
But I think it's important in thinking about watching it at the time and certainly making it, right, to think about like the case where you're in, where there are still a bunch of people who have lobotomies about, right? There are a bunch of people who are still claiming this is a good thing, but there's increased social pressure around you probably shouldn't be doing this, right?
Right.
It'd be like right now if they made The Prisoner, they'd have an episode about somebody who did like an all meat diet or something. So they do this whole 5 minutes of medical documentary.
So this is another spot where I think the camera work is really, really good. It is like so disorienting. It is so, but it's disorienting, but not difficult to watch.
Right.
Like it does a convincing job of selling you on how strange this must feel for number 6.
Right.
And it makes a medical procedure interesting to watch.
Totally. And like really amps the tension.
Right.
Which can be tough for something that's, fairly dry.
Totally.
One of the things I think is interesting is that, again, added from the script, even though this version of the script does have this scene much the same way. So this is after the sort of lobotomy change that you mentioned. The script doesn't mention actually revealing to the audience that this lobotomy didn't happen.
Right.
Whereas right before we go to commercial, we see 86 turn a big knob from like 100 to 0.
I thought it was the other way around, actually.
Is it? Hold on. I'm going back.
She turns the knob all the way up to do the thing.
We see it's in the middle. She starts going to the right, and then she goes all the way to the left. Yeah. So I think I've got it.
But it is. You were right. The fact that it shows that only when the fade out has already started is really kind of obfuscates that.
Totally, but I think there is an intention there in terms of not wanting to be 100% clear whether this happened or not, right?
Yeah, totally.
But I do. It is kind of a weird thing to not just like leave it completely ambiguous, right? Like, don't show us anything that could give us a hint about this being a fake, right?
Yeah, one of watching the episode back with Parks's commentary is that he was a big supporter of a lot of the like structural changes, but he felt like a lot of the presentation of like giving things away too early was pretty consistent. Of like, it would have been better to have this part of it a little bit of a mystery for longer, rather than not at all.
I mean, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Why is McGowan smiling like the Joker in this?
So the script called for this too. I can only assume that it's the idea that he's been like drugged in some way.
Right.
But I don't know.
He's been tranquilized, but when they actually like put him in place to like zap his brain with the sound waves, then he gets this like real manic smile going. Yeah.
Yeah. He loves this. He's a sicko.
Yeah.
He was saying, I've been waiting for you to lobotomize me this whole time. Finally. So then he awakens with a little, bandage over his right, temple, which is notably, it's the left temple usually would be where they would actually do this in a real lobotomy that you end up with a scar, but it's not incorrect, right? That it'd be around the temple.
Right.
And, you might have an audience that might be somewhat familiar with these sorts of scars. So it's sort of believable here.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the same doctor from before who, is saying to take it easy, that everything went well, that you fell asleep, right? Treating him very calmly and kindly, etc. 86 comes back to take him away, who's now going to be like basically his nurse, apparently.
Seems that way, yeah. And they have a little parade for him.
They do. Everybody's so excited.
They fixed him.
Yeah, notably, they do see, another round of our patients, a different patient in this case, back at it again. This one is John Bailey. It was Hugh Elton earlier. Back at it again at the aversion therapy. Yeah. He just loves to see pictures of number 2 and get all sweaty. And yeah, there's a parade on the way back. Everybody's so excited for him.
I mean, the villagers never miss an opportunity for a parade.
They love parades. There's nothing to do here.
That's right.
They can't all work out for 6 hours a day.
Yep. They don't have enough music. They don't have Twitter.
They do not. Thanks to number 2 taking it over and turning it into X.
That's right. Speaking of, they get back to number 6's house, and number 2 is just sitting there waiting for him.
Yep.
I really like this like composition of like number 2 relaxing in the chair and then him getting up to leave and 86 putting number 6 into the same chair, which is like a recliner.
Yep.
And then I think we get some really, really good camera work of number 6 watching her making tea.
Totally. Him noticing, right, as she like very obviously plops a couple pills.
Right.
And it fizzes, which is like, is this Alka-Seltzer?
Yeah, again, something that could have been rendered very dry, but feels very interesting to watch.
Totally. I agree. It is interesting, right? Like, up until this point, he's been fairly bemused, like not really suspicious. I wonder to what extent Two's like little power play of being in his chair isn't like activating the like defense of the home, right. defense of his territory feelings, right? Maybe he wouldn't have noticed if like he hadn't already been sort of primed for this. I wonder. I gestured before the original script seemed to make it such that number 6 doesn't realize he wasn't lobotomized until the fight in a little way. Right. But here's the thing. Given that they didn't actually sever his brain, I wonder if he just woke up and went, I haven't been lobotomized. I don't feel lobotomized at all. I better play along. I bet... I agree. I do think I better play along is like the thing that 6 feels in the majority of this episode.
I think so, yeah.
Oh, they're taking me to some sort of debate club in the woods. I better play along.
Oh, I'm getting hit with umbrellas. I better pretend I'm getting hit with umbrellas.
There's some weird women in my house. I better play along.
Oh, no. Ow.
Yeah. So there's a bit here of, 6 yelling at 86 to go get his rug, his blanket, so that he can dump his drink into a potted plant.
I've never heard a blanket called a rug in this way before.
I mean, we heard it in an earlier episode, remember?
Oh, no, I don't. Surprise.
Earlier, we had number 80, or I believe, let me just double check.
It doesn't matter. Sorry. It was just a quirk of language.
Sure. But it was specifically that it fits in a little bit with this episode, right? In terms of number 6, in that occurrence was talked about helping an old woman with her rug, right?
I just assumed it was a rug.
But she was like in a wheelchair and like helping put the blanket up.
Sure.
Was the idea. And it fits with this episode in terms of like number 6, like having a soft spot for older women. Anyway. So 86 leaves after being sort of chased out by 6, says he has to take a nap.
6 manages to dump the drugged tea. And then, bamf, teleportation. Number 2 is back in the house.
I told you.
Ready? I told you.
But then how would we don't see anything to indicate he walked back in. He's just suddenly there.
And again, it feels like Free For All of like this surreal nightmare mode that we're in of like, oh, this person is just in my house. Yes. Like giving me the business about why I resigned.
Yes. This is the bit of me feeling like this guy's actually menacing.
Yeah.
Like, he, for no reason, he like smooths out his bandage first, which we know he has like actual like wounds under there. So he's just like inflicting pain for no reason, right? Like Hammer into Anvil 2 had nothing on this guy.
No, this guy is menacingly affectionate in a way.
Yes. This is what I was saying. I feel like this guy is like actually unsettling in a way that a 2 has not been, at least for me, before.
Totally.
And this little exchange is a really good number 6, number 2 exchange. The camera is sort of wild. It's like swinging back and forth, right? And 2 suddenly, out of nowhere, brings up again this question we have not heard in a ton of episodes, right? Mm-hmm. It's been, let me just double check. I think I wrote this down. The last time we would have seen this, talking about the resignation, is the Schizoid Man.
It's a long time ago.
It's so long. That's episode 5. That's half the series away at this point.
To what do you attribute the question being raised now?
So I think this conversation gives us a little bit of an insight into that, because 2 is so incredibly fixated on this question and starts like reading into 6's answers. Mm-hmm. Right? He, 6 mentions he needs time, and 2 says, "Oh, it was about time, was it?" Again, speaking as if he's Winnie the Pooh. And 6 yells, "No, it wasn't about time." But the fact that he's so desperate to like latch onto something, and the fact that he sort of thinking through logically should not have agreed to it, but agrees at the end to like let 6 communicate in front of the whole village to be able to get this answer.
Yeah, he becomes increasingly desperate to like wring these answers out and continues to do things that are perhaps badly considered in the hopes that they will pay off eventually.
Exactly. So to me, this feels very much like this is a guy in a similar mode as our A, B, and C number 2. Right. This is somebody who, for whatever reason, pressure from the top or whatever, is exactly where Colin Gordon's 2 was in terms of desperately needing this answer to like save his skin.
Right.
Now, again, I mentioned this in the last recording, right, for It's Your Funeral, but this is part of an arc that a bunch of the fans call as like a torture arc or like the hell arc or whatever, right? And so there's a real sense of like the things they're being willing to do to him are increasing in intensity. Like they did do the whole thing of kidnapping him and like brainwashing him in Schizoid Man, notably.
Yeah, they did do that.
And like drugging him in Free for All, right? But in those cases, while they had like these fairly elaborate plans to accomplish whatever they were trying to accomplish there, that's debatable exactly what that was, right? At no point are they like actually taking away his like comfort in the village.
Right.
In Schizoid Man, even though they're acting like he's number 14, he's treated with respect. Everybody's really nice to him.
12.
He can do whatever he wants. Sorry, 12. Yes. Good job remembering. And then, right in Free for All.
Yeah, I mentioned in the previous episode, It's Your Funeral, how very frequently number 6 bucks the rules and or sabotages number 2's or parts of the village or operations and stuff like that. And there's no reprisal. There's no punishment or anything like that. This is the first time that he's come anywhere close to like people like mistreating him in and that's not to say people haven't beaten him up and stuff like that before.
Happens
but
at
like,
the end of Free for All.
This is the first time that I think we're seeing like he was told do this or else, and so he didn't do it and faced reprisal.
Yep. It feels like a market change, right? And as we're heading into the end here and all the things that are going to be happening with that, I think it is sort of a good thing to be keeping in mind of where we're heading.
Agreed.
So from here, 2 doesn't get what he wants, and he says, okay, we'll have this little chat again later, right? Mm-hmm. Leaves the room and immediately teleports again.
He does immediately teleport. Yeah, somewhere else to be, he's going to be there instantly.
86 maybe you can buy if she like really booked it. Could have made it to the office to watch this. But like 2 leaves the room, 6 walks to his bathroom, his washroom, starts looking at the wound on his face, and is immediately they're watching from the number 2 room.
Okay. Actual answer.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some kind of Wonka Vader situation between number 2's house and number 6's house. Given how often we have seen number 2's suddenly arriving.
Totally. If you remember the beginning of Free for All, right?
Right.
We had a long conversation about this guy was on the phone with him. We saw him on the video call in your office and suddenly he's outside, right?
Right.
If there is a Wonka Vader connecting these two things, that could go a long way to explaining what was happening there.
Sure.
Right? Maybe it wasn't pre-recorded.
All right. I have to 3D model the village to try and figure this out now.
And notably, right, like we know there's an elevator that connects from below 2's office to above 2's office because we know 2 sleeps below his office, or at least some 2's do. Right. And so we don't know anything right now about what that under area looks like. Right. Except that it can summon Waldos from beneath as well.
Yep. I mean, we've seen other areas that are underneath the spaces, you know, the catacombs and such.
Yes, totally. But there's a whole sense of there has to be a mechanized area down there.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
What we've seen so far is mostly like natural cave formations that exist beneath the village. We haven't seen anything about what must be there, which is a fairly technologically advanced zone beneath the village. Right. You could make some arguments about us maybe seeing it again in Free for All when he like is in the little spinny chair in the council chambers and goes down, and then he somehow ends up in the labor exchange office. Right. That's another case of like he goes down a weird corridor and somehow is in another building. Right.
Yep.
Anyway, it's just some cool things to think about in terms of how space works in the village.
Completely.
OK. You know, I didn't go into this recording, just as a quick aside, I didn't go into this recording thinking we were going to have so much sort of like foreshadowing that we could talk about for like final 5 episodes.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. It's a good ep. Wow. I think it's actually stronger. There's a bunch of people that I was reading about who were saying this episode's weaker on a rewatch. I think it's actually stronger on a rewatch if you think about where the series is going.
Yeah, I mentioned before that this feels of a type with some of the stronger episodes in the first half of the season, but I think it does such a good job kind of reestablishing stakes here in the back half to be like, okay, we're sort of turning a corner here. We've been doing some other stuff, but we're going to get back to some things that we haven't touched on in a while.
Yep. So after having a brief discussion with 2 and 86, right, in the office, 86 mentions how she shouldn't be giving him more of this Midol, whatever that is,
right.
You know, for another 4 hours at least. And 2 says, no, go give it to him now. He's as strong as a bull. As 6 is just punching in the background. He's just punching his hand over and over again. Some aggressive tendencies remaining, perhaps. And then it's either
that was one of the things that Parks called out as like, yeah, it doesn't make sense that he would already have realized that he has not been severed in this way. And so I wish he had been a little bit more cowed here until he gets to the fight. Sure.
But you can even imagine, right, like even if he wasn't lobotomized, he was still drugged.
Yes, he was.
And so you can imagine this is him, like, you know, how like if you've ever come out of being drugged or whatever, you can like you're moving your body, you're shaking your body. Right. Or if like a limb falls asleep. Right. You're trying to like wake it up. Right?
Yes.
It sort of reads like that to me.
Number 2 sends her back to administer more drugs, which means more tea.
Yep.
Which means number 6 gets to get mad at a woman about how to make tea.
Thank goodness. We also get the bit we deferred to earlier about the do you like my dress? More feminine than trousers, right? Or slacks or whatever he says. He shows her this extremely elaborate way of making tea and then on camera swaps the teacups.
It's good. It's just a straight up. That's classic. That's good to me.
Classic. And you know, they clearly don't catch it at first because 2 is so happy about watching him drink this tea, thinking he's going to be even more drugged than he was before. And then when she reveals she is drugged instead after a cut, goes, stupid woman.
Yeah, he and 28 and Angelo are watching the video.
Their favorite TV show, The Prisoner.
Yeah, they're watching The Prisoner. Like number 2 says, ultimately domestic. I think I'd like some tea. There's just a really charming shot of these 3 bald men all watching TV together.
Yeah. It's a family.
I hadn't realized until now. I don't think the supervisor has a single line in the episode. He's just doesn't. There.
He gets a credit though, so you know, he's getting rate. Good on him. Yeah, so it's 2's the dad, 28's the mom, and Angela's the baby.
That's not. I think they rotate being who's who.
I love this for them. But then, of course, when he sees how 86 bungled it, he doesn't want the tea anymore, which is really sad. Angela works so hard on it.
Yeah.
So from here, we get into like the final act of the episode, right? Which I think we can do pretty quickly. 2 summons 86 back and 6 starts wandering around. But for whatever reason, 2 is convinced that it's fine to have him wander because he should still be under the effects at least of the first round of drugs.
Right.
right? And so he's not too worried about it yet. He, I think, very clearly sends Lobo Man to go find him.
I think so.
Because otherwise, why would he run into him?
Right. There's something confusing right before that, like literally in the same scene, is someone else sees number 6 and then acts as if he's still on mutual, like looks at him and turns and goes away. I couldn't figure out why that is taking place. I wondered if maybe this had been shot maybe out of sequence or something like that.
Maybe. I mean, I wonder to what extent, like, they can see there are these 2 Lobo men supposedly in front of them. Right?
Sure. Maybe he just doesn't want to deal with them.
Yeah. I mean, we get a little bit of this from, you know, the acting that we have number 46 doing earlier, which I think he does quite well here. This is, again, Thomas Heathcote. I think he does a really good job of selling, like, being sensitive about this.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it does quite a good job.
Now, I don't know if he's actually been lobotomized. I suspect he hasn't been. I think this is all just a ploy, but
sure.
Regardless, he does a good job of playing as though he is like socially ostracized still, as like some people don't want to deal with. Anyway, so they have this little back and forth. He points out, you've also been lobotomized just like me. Haha. And then 6 wanders to his gym in the woods, where he seems like not to be able to bring about the oomph to like exercise just by punching his hand until
bullies come in from stage left and stage right.
They do that.
Yeah.
It's the same bullies.
Yes.
They start sort of like punching him, and then immediately after like they each get one punch in, 6 jumps up and kicks them both and like starts strangling them with his legs. And this is sort of fairly elaborate action sequence using all the different gym equipment.
Yeah. On the one hand, it's quite mean to bully someone that you think just had a lobotomy.
It is.
And 2, this is supposed to be the bit where number 6 realizes like, oh, I wasn't lobotomized. I'm still capable of doing all the things that I once was. Yes. Something else is going on here.
Yes.
Which, you know, whether or not that works or not, given that we've seen that he already suspects that there is something weird going on. Yeah. Again, so much of this episode works for me that I'm kind of willing to just sort of let it slide.
Yeah, totally. I'm completely with you. I think that there's been enough ambiguity, even though it's pretty clear at this point, that like this mostly just serves to be like a final nail in the coffin, so to speak, on the like he was
not even the final, unfortunately, because he still interrogates 86 about it.
It's true, but just to like figure out what has gone on, right? Like he clearly knows he wasn't lobotomized at this point.
Yeah.
In the script, he says at the end of the scene, "Found my punch," which is nothing. It's a bad line. Yeah, they can't all be winners.
That's right.
There is an additional 2 complaining about 86 scene because she hasn't shown up in his office.
Yeah, she's just out here picking up flowers.
It's fun. It's silly. You know, we talked about 86 has been such like a confident, right, and like composed character. And so I think because of that, this scene works in a way where if she was like a shrinking violet, the scene would just be like painful to watch.
Yes, I completely agree. Here, instead, she's just sort of dreamy, right? She's just sort of like off in her own world. She says something interesting here. She says, "I'm higher than number 2.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that means?
Well, obviously, she's referring to the fact that she's been drugged, Brendan, and so she's no. I mean, we've theorized on this a lot, right? Like, if we go back to the general, for example, right, and we were talking about how it feels like there's some ambiguity in the general around who actually has control here, right? Like, it feels like I think it was number 12 or 14 in that one. I'm trying to go back and find it while I'm chatting. Yes, number 12. Number 12 in that one, it felt like he might have authority over number 2, maybe, or there might be some like power play going on there, right? And so there's a real feeling of like every so often they'll bring somebody in from outside for a specific purpose, right? Like clearly this lady's a doctor, or at least like knows enough about medicine to know about, you know, how often you can give somebody medicine. and she like knows enough about this procedure to be able to describe it very, precisely. And it feels very much like she is someone who's been brought outside of the village regular structure in order to like do this plot. Right.
Right.
I don't know. How did you take it?
Yeah, basically that.
There we go. That's the answer then, everybody. Write that down in your notes.
We got it. I got it wrong. The supervisor does have lines. He gets on the horn to summon 86 once again.
Right. And that's
but
when
she doesn't
we find
come
her
back.
She doesn't go back. She's collecting some green leafy things in the woods. It looks like she's about to eat them at one point, which I found very funny. It's like she instead just like pushes them onto her neck.
Yeah.
Which is really good. And then there's this silly bit of two hypnotizing her with a watch.
Yeah, with a wristwatch.
Yeah.
The classic implement for doing cartoon style hypnosis.
It's really funny. Like, it's not the fact that it's a watch that makes the hypnotism work. Like,
it's the fact that she's drugged out of her mind.
But like the logic of the show seems to be, well, if you have a watch, you can hypnotize people.
Anyone can do this. It is possible.
It can be done.
It can be done. Trust me.
So he hypnotizes her into giving her report, right? Yep. Which she does, which just basically lays it out for any of the slower members of the audience who wouldn't have realized what was happening by now.
Yeah, if anyone is watching this and had a lobotomy beforehand, this tells them. Sorry, that's mean. I'm sorry, people that have had lobotomies.
I really hope that nobody listening has had a lobotomy, and if you have, I'm so sorry for you.
If you have, do not get in touch with us.
Do please. Anyway,
if I see you, I will turn around in the road and walk away. I've got too much going on right now.
Anyway, so at this point, we also get a hint that Six has, hypnotized her for some other purpose.
Yes.
Right. Some unseen plot.
Yes. He says, here's what I want you to do. And then we fade out.
Yes. Well, he says something about chimes, right? Like when there's a fourth chime, right? Something is going to happen, which lets us to sort of know ahead of time that there's a problem there, or something that's going to happen, I guess I should say.
He goes back to number 2.
He does go back to number 2. At that point, he says, it all worked. You did it.
I love being lobotomized now.
I love it so much. Thank you. Thank you for lobotomizing me, number 2.
I love it so much that I want to tell everyone
about how great lobotomies are. I did think it was interesting that 2 says there's no need, right, to confess to everyone. You only need to confess to me, right? And how he even kicks out number 28, right? Which feeds into this feeling of like 2, for some reason, really wants to be the one to do it. Right. To like get this out of number 6. He wants to be able to take responsibility. He doesn't want to, have anybody else potentially get the responsibility here.
Right.
But besides that, or despite that, I guess, he folds really fast.
He knows how difficult it is to get number 6 to do anything. And so if number 6 wants to call the shot, he's willing to be like, you know what? Fine. If that's what gets you talking, for sure.
Yeah. It is interesting, right? That like, so he has seen at this point that 86 got drugged. But I think what we're supposed to take this as is that he's such a misogynist that he just assumed she did it on accident.
Yeah.
That like this wasn't 6 having sort of figured things out and doing this. This is just 86 being useless.
Do you think maybe he doesn't realize she's been drugged, but he just thinks, oh, she's gone head over heels for number 6. She's fallen for his wiles.
Yeah. I mean, he said that whole thing about more feminine than slacks or whatever. And so because of that, clearly she's just in love with him.
This is typical. She gives someone a lobotomy and then falls in love with them.
This happens every time. 86 is a great agent, but she keeps falling in love with the people we lobotomize.
That's right.
Anyway, so he agrees to this. They basically immediately then cut to the outside of the village, right? 2 actually makes the announcement, which is somewhat unusual.
It is.
To say, everybody come on down to outside my house. 6 is going to give a big speech. There's weird red and white bars that are on the columns. I don't know what that's about. It's unusual. Doesn't really matter, though. They weren't here previously.
Yeah, I think this is a different version of the set. This is the set that they have built at in London rather than the one that's actually on location at Port Merion.
Sure, but I think that's the same one for It's Your Funeral as well. Doesn't really matter. It's not important. So at this point, 6 starts doing this speech where he talks about how, this is all thanks to number 2, which worries number 2 a little bit. But then he talks about how grateful he is, and so he calms down. And then he's sort of clearly just buying time until the chimes start hitting. And as soon as the 4th chime hits, what happens, Brendan?
Number 86 declares number 2 unmutual.
And that's all it takes.
People, you know what? It's a call to action, and these people have been trained to respond to calls to action.
Matthew White, who is the first author of The Prisoner's Companion that we've talked so much about, mostly negatively, points out that this is the most sort of unsympathetic portrayal of the villagers.
Yeah, I also saw that. I get how you arrive there. I feel like this is par for the course, personally. We've seen them driven to action like this before in Dance of the Dead, in Free for All.
Sure.
We've seen them whipped up in that same way, right?
Totally, but it is typically because the village wardens, the village organization, right, is the one doing the whipping up, right?
Sure.
So there's at least some feeling that like maybe they've been threatened into this, or like you can imagine reasons for why they feel compelled to act in this way. As opposed to in this case, it feels very much that like 86 just says it and then 6 goes, 86 has already said her first confession that 2 is secretly unmutual. And everybody's just like, yep, sounds good, chief.
Yeah, I wonder if there's not something that might have been, if there had been some way to frame it almost as like what do you call it when people spontaneously like have expressions of faith or something like that? You know what I mean? Like a congregation, because clearly that's what number 6 is going for here is like, I have been compelled to confess my truth. Is there anyone else here? And then calls on you. Like looking up their 86. Names. Well, no. Like if he had called upon number 42, who is now part of the subcommittee, and she says, totally. Yes, I was a poet, and now I'm part of the subcommittee. You too can be healed. And then he calls upon the Lobo Man. The Lobo Man is like, yes, I underwent social conversion, and I am well too. He. And then number 86 goes, I have a confession to make. Number 2 is unmutual. And then it's more of a build up. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, the end of the episode is a little bit rushed feeling, for sure.
Yes.
It is interesting, though, once like the crowd, like 2 tries to run for it.
He does.
Which is funny. And the crowd like surrounds him. And once the crowd surrounds him, at this point, 6 like drops the charade and is like, it's not too late. You 2 can be free, right? There's quite a bit of a like be free by order, right? The same sort of thing that happened in Free for All here.
Yes.
Of like, I can grant you freedom, but only if you listen to me, right? Exactly. It's on my terms.
Yes. I have control.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I have seized control. Get out of your houses. Be free, etc.
And they chase after him with umbrellas.
They do chase after him with umbrellas. In the script, 2 goes down before the rest of the crowd turns against 86 and strikes her. To like really, sell the final bit of like, he's trying to silence her, but it also works to tip the crowd against him and say, yes, he really is unmutual, right? And yes, he sort of starts walking away, and then like the walk breaks into a run. We get 6 sort of following along from a distance, even though it's clearly not that they're actually there. And this is like other shots and doubles in Port Merion. It's fine. Interestingly, the very, very end of the episode was supposed to be a little bit different. So there was supposed to be the crowd, chasing him away. But then Rover was supposed to show up.
Ah, yes.
And this is the second episode in a row where this is supposed to happen in the script, right? Because the same with It's Your Funeral. Rover was supposed to show up and chase 2 away.
Oh, huh.
Yeah. Like 2, he turns against 2 here.
Interesting.
Which I really wish they had shot because, we get this sort of fun buildup of Rover being used as like, Clockwork Orange kind of way earlier in the episode. To have him show up here at the end, I think is pretty cool. But I think there's an even cooler thing that does happen because they shot Rover and Six in the same scene and they kept a little bit of it in the episode. When Six is going through the bush, you can briefly see him like turn away as he's going through one of these bushes. And you see for just a second, we have a Rover in the background. He's like in the back of the shot.
What?
Uh-huh.
Huh.
It's very easy to miss in terms of what's happening there. Yeah. It's when you do the long shot. So he comes out of the bridge or comes out of the bush. There's on the path. And if you look in the background behind him as he's coming out of the path, you can see the white ball of Rover bouncing.
Huh.
And I think that's really interesting, right? Because I talked about it before back in Free For All of like Rover as a vector for like unreality or magical realism entering the scene. And so the effect here is not that like Rover is this big prominent force in the episode, but it's almost like Rover's haunting the episode. Right?
Yeah.
He shows up only in visions and then like is vaguely present in the background, in the very back of the scene, right at the end. So easily you could miss him.
Yeah. A specter is haunting the village.
Exactly. Anyway, yeah. So I just thought that was a fun little bit there that probably the audience wouldn't have noticed even if you watched the episode.
Yeah. One really, really good bit of writing here. So number 2 has had these weird, like almost like Southern expressions throughout the thing. And when number 6 is giving his speech, he says, to borrow one of number 2's sayings, the butcher with the sharpest knife has the warmest heart.
It is a good line. It's a good line. Yeah. So that's the episode, right?
Yeah.
There's clearly stuff going on here with like Red Scare, right, thematically, right, which we didn't get up as we were going through, of like communism, right, of people being like a secret communist, right, McCarthyism here for sure, people being chased out and made to like leave communities, being unwelcome socially. Yeah,
Parks brought up all of that stuff as like, all of that was in the air. He prefaced it in a very amusing way where he said, we were a generation who grew up during the war, the Hitler War. But yeah, talking about how brainwashing and who people really served and the police state were issues of great concern for everyone back then. Totally.
It is interesting, right, that they use the term unmutual, right?
Yes.
Here, as opposed because that's sort of like almost like an antonym for like communist or socialist. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
Which I just thought was fun. My sort of bigger takeaway that we didn't get in this episode is this episode more than any other makes clear that like Six is it's clear he's been a loner, right, in prior episodes. But this is the first episode where he's like a social outcast.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think that this episode actually goes a long way towards explaining a bunch of the fandom response to The Prisoner.
Say more.
So we talked about it last time that like the biggest, longest running sort of fan website is the Unmutual.
Yes, that's true.
And I think like imagine you're a young child as you were in the 1960s, right, when they filmed The Prisoner. And I was already in my 20s.
I've got my big lollipop.
You got your big lollipop.
I got my toy airplane
outfit. And like you watch this episode, right? Like number 6 is extremely cool, extremely competent, and he wins. Like, though, again, this is the sort of like in quotations wins we've talked about several times, right?
That's correct.
Despite being a social outcast. And number 6 in this episode is literally bullied. And there's the power fantasy of turning against the bullies and winning.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think if you're of
making your biggest bully the social outcast instead.
Exactly. Right. And so I think if you are a young kid who feels like they're alone, who feels like they cannot connect with other people socially, this episode is going to have a big impact on you.
I think so. Yeah.
And I think that goes a long way in terms of people, there's a bunch of people who get mad when you criticize number 6. Right.
Yes.
Because I think in part they
see him as a hero.
They see him as a hero, but they also they empathize, they see themselves in number 6.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
They see someone who is a genius, a loner, physically incredible, but still on the outs, who rightfully perhaps should be running things.
Who, perhaps by virtue of his great individualism and the fact that he doesn't get along well with everyone, can see things more clearly than everyone else.
Exactly.
Who isn't quite the same as your regular people. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It was a little bit exceptional.
Yeah, almost an Ubermensch or something.
Right. Or like a Jughead.
Or like a Jughead.
That's redundant. Jughead is, of course, an Ubermensch.
Obviously. Look, think about all the hamburgers he can eat.
Wait, hang on. Non-binary Ubermensch.
But this is a very classic form of particularly young adult literature, right? Of to the point where it's now parodied as young adult literature, right? Of oh, I thought I was one of the uglies, or I thought I was a circle, but everybody was a triangle. And then finally it turned out I was the best triangle of them all, or whatever, right? It's just one of these, but it's sort of a very early version of one of these.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was an interesting thing to bring up as we're thinking about the public response to The Prisoner and why it's so long lasting. Okay. Is there anything else on your end? I think that got through all my bits.
I think that's it. I really enjoyed this episode. What I most want to know is what your number one with a bullet is. What is the standout performance, character, bit, scene, line of dialogue that stood out to you in A Change of Mind?
You mentioned before, this episode sort of takes us back to an earlier version of The Prisoner. So I'm going to go back to an earlier version of The Prisoner, and I'm going to give it to none other than June Ellis. Number 48, head of the appeals subcommittee. I think she does such an incredible job. She shows up, halfway through the episode or something and is there for maybe all of 5-10 minutes or something. But she does such a good job of selling herself as a force of nature to be reckoned with. I really enjoy her.
Completely agree. I likewise need to look out for the little man. I'm going to give it up to the tunnel snakes themselves. The two bullies. I wish you were in more episodes, or I wish we had some goons. Or at least a more regular set of goons. But yes. I'll appreciate you for who you are for now.
Yeah. John Hamblin, Michael Billington, thank you. It is funny that we had this Michael Miller, number 93 here, and who was a goon earlier, but he has been upgraded from goon to sobbing man. Or
Totally. Anyway. I will also give it up for Thomas Heathcote, number 46, a.k.a. the Lobo Man. Just that sort of person we've seen in other episodes, person that is in distress as a result of the village's machinations, and I think he does a exceptional job of being one of those.
I completely agree. Well, Brendan, do you want to rate it first, or shall I?
Boy, oh boy, oh boy! I really, really enjoyed this episode. I am going to give this episode 86 out of 100 British cups of tea.
That'll show them. I actually came in lower on this episode for once, but I think that our conversation has actually raised my opinion of it. But I think for the purposes of consistency, I'm still going to give it 3 out of 4 doses of Midol.
I can't wait to go out into the garden and start eating flowers.
It's what we all aim to do.
Yeah, that's what Flowers for Algernon is about, right?
I think so. Yeah. Just like how one flew over the...
It's about one man traveling the world to find the most delicious flowers.
Yeah.
I'm
Just
Guy
like
Fieri. This is Flowers for Algernon.
Oh man, I would really like to see Guy Fieri's Flowers for Algernon. I think it'd sound a little something like this.
Next time, we're going to watch an episode of The Prisoner starring Patrick McGoohan.
What?
An episode that I like to call Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling. An episode of The Prisoner, a show starring Patrick McGoohan, who surely will feature in the episode Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling. I can't wait to see what my old pal Patrick McGoohan is up to. I hope you'll join us.
Oh, no.
In the meanwhile, if people want to join you on the internet, where should they find you?
Oh, they can find me on Blue Sky at Matthew Guz. How about you, Brendan?
You can find me on Blue Sky at brendanmcleod.com. You can find my blog at brendanmcleod.dev. You can find the artist who did our cover work at cyfsweetman.card.co. You can find the musician that did our theme song at devindecibel.bandcamp.com. You can find the show at the-prisoners-dilemma.com. Hey, if you enjoy listening to the show, tell a friend or give us a 5-star rating. We'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, please.
Until then, I'll be seeing you.
Not if I see you first.